Ever wonder what's really happening when your dad won't stop talking about paying off his mortgage early? Or why your Gen X manager keeps a war chest of savings so large it almost seems excessive, yet still won't upgrade her 10-year-old car? Or why your younger cousin just converted 2 weeks of paychecks into some cryptocurrency you've never heard of? It's not recklessness. It's not ignorance. And it definitely isn't laziness. Every single one of those choices becomes completely logical the moment you understand what each generation walked into and what quietly got pulled out from under them. Here's the thing. Most financial conversations completely skip over. The money beliefs you carry aren't really the product of your own choices. They're survival instincts, encoded responses to a financial system that rewrote its own rulebook every 10 years, then pointed at your habits and said the problem was you. Here's how it actually unfolded. But first, one concept you need in your head before we go any further. Call it the Great Risk Offload. Over the past 7 decades, something enormous shifted in who bears the financial consequences of an uncertain world. Government stepped back. Corporations restructured. And quietly, steadily, the weight of financial risk landed on ordinary individuals. Pensions gave way to self-directed retirement accounts. Lifetime employment gave way to at-will contracts. Housing went from basic shelter to a speculative asset class. Each transition came wrapped in a story about freedom and personal empowerment. What it really was, every single time, was a transfer of risk, away from institutions and onto you personally. Every generation absorbed that shift differently. They each built money, habits that were perfectly rational, responses to the version of the world they actually inhabited. The cruel irony is that we've spent decades mocking those habits, without ever questioning what produced them. So let's go back to the beginning. Picture 1952. The war is over. The economy is roaring. Factory jobs are abundant, unions have real teeth, and a single income can genuinely carry a household, mortgage, kids, vacations, and a retirement that pays out for the rest of your life without you lifting a finger. The deal between worker and system was concrete and dependable. Show up, do your part, get taken care of. What kind of financial worldview does that environment build? An almost religious reverence for cash, a deep moral discomfort with debt. Saving wasn't a tactic, it was a character trait, the marker of a serious and trustworthy person. And sticking with your employer wasn't just smart, it was a point of pride. Here's the thing that almost never gets said plainly. The silent generation didn't develop those habits because they were smarter or more disciplined than everyone who came after. They developed them because those habits actually worked in their specific moment. They happened to enter adulthood during one of the most financially secure eras in modern history and drew the very human conclusion that this was simply how things worked. That assumption, that honest effort and institutional loyalty produce stability and reward became the invisible measuring stick, the gold standard that every generation after them would be unfairly judged against. And it was never going to last. Boomers arrived in that same golden light. But they also arrived just in time to watch it dim. Just as they needed to be building their long-term financial security, something vanished. The pension. In its place appeared a new product presented with great enthusiasm. The 401k, you're in control now. You decide where to invest. You're not just a worker, you're a participant in the markets. What wasn't said out loud, this was the moment companies transferred the risk of retirement directly from their balance sheets onto millions of workers who had no professional training in portfolio management. For the first time in history, an entire generation was expected to successfully navigate market volatility as a job requirement on top of their actual job. The other half of the plan? Buy real estate. Watch it appreciate. Let the house do the heavy lifting. So yes, boomers became fixated on property values. Yes, they built their sense of security around their portfolios. Yes, their identity became entangled with their career in a way that can look rigid or self-important from the outside. But look again at what they were actually doing, holding on with white knuckles to the only life rafts available. My retirement account and my home. That's the whole plan. I'm not letting go. That's not stubbornness. That's what it looks like to be the first generation of unwitting test subjects in a massive, unannounced financial experiment. Now we get to the generation that absorbed the most repeated lessons in broken promises. Gen X watched institutions make guarantees, then watched those institutions shrug when the guarantees evaporated. Their parents got cut after 20-plus years of company loyalty because a restructuring memo came down from above. The dot-com surge that felt like a generational opportunity collapsed just as Gen X was getting established. Then 2008 arrived. Right. when many had done every single thing correctly. Degree earned, career built, house purchased, family started. The floor dropped again anyway. At a certain point, your relationship with security fundamentally changes. You stop expecting the floor to hold, so you stop building strategies that require it to. Gen X built money habits oriented entirely around self-reliance. Emergency funds so substantial, they look like overkill. To anyone who hasn't watched a floor disappear, multiple income streams assembled years before the phrase side hustle existed. And a calm, settled distrust of anyone in an expensive suit offering ironclad guarantees. They're not cynics for the sake of it. They're people who have watched the film enough times to know how it ends. So they prepare for the scene where everything falls apart, quietly, without drama, while also accumulating more wealth than most observers expect, because they never stopped building even when they stopped believing. Behavioral scientists have a name for the cognitive strategy. Gen X perfected defensive pessimism, expecting the worst, planning accordingly, getting on with it anyway. Gen X simply calls it being realistic. And then we arrive at the generation that inherited the worst hand at the table. The script handed to millennials was beautifully clear. Education is the path. Borrow for it if you have to. Debt that builds your future is investment, not burden. Graduate, enter the workforce. Build a career. Buy a home. Everything follows from there. What the script quietly omitted: tuition was in the middle of an unprecedented multi-decade explosion. The job market was about to be gutted by a financial crisis of historic scale. And wages, for the kinds of jobs that college degrees were supposed to unlock, had been effectively stagnant for years. The system committed something genuinely damaging here. It persuaded teenagers, legally adults, but with no real framework for understanding what they were agreeing to take on enormous, inescapable debt. Then it delivered them into a labor market that had already rewritten itself around the premise that workers were interchangeable and disposable. The career they'd borrowed for had quietly changed shape while they were studying for it. So what beliefs and habits did this environment build? Renting indefinitely because ownership got repriced into fantasy. Spending on experiences and the present moment because every long horizon promise had eventually been revealed as fiction. Cobbling together multiple part-time income streams because one was structurally insufficient. When someone from an older generation offers the advice to stop spending on small luxuries, they are, without realizing it, completely misreading the psychology at play. When every large future promise has collapsed, spending on something you can actually experience right now isn't a failure of discipline. It's the logical conclusion of watching long-term thinking repeatedly fail to pay off. If the future is unreliable, I'll choose something that's real today. That's not a character flaw. That's a perfectly coherent adaptation to a world that kept breaking its word. Gen Z was born into the aftermath and came of age inside the wreckage. They watched the 2008 crisis reshape their childhoods through their parents' anxiety. Then they graduated into a pandemic. Then they watched inflation methodically erode what they managed to save. Their financial education didn't arrive from a bank pamphlet or a retirement planning seminar. It came from Reddit threads, TikTok videos, and YouTube creators who, honestly, sometimes had better practical knowledge than the institutions they were meant to trust. And the financial products built for them? Zero-commission trading platforms with celebratory animations. Crypto ecosystems marketed as the great democratization of wealth. Options trading accessible through an app with the same interface as a mobile game. Relentless visual feed of other people's curated and aestheticized financial wins. So Gen Z holds two completely contradictory beliefs simultaneously, and genuinely cannot resolve the tension between them. The conventional path is structurally broken, and maybe a single asymmetric bet is the only realistic escape route. The meme stock YOLO trades. The all-or-nothing swings between obsessive productivity and complete withdrawal. The persistent sensation of being behind on a timeline that was already impossible before they started. To older observers, this reads as instability or immaturity. But follow the actual logic. If playing it safe won't move the needle, and the game itself is designed against you, then either you swing for the extraordinary or you accept that careful, patient play was never going to work anyway. That's not immaturity. That's what rational thinking looks like when you inherit accumulated financial trauma and hand someone a casino in their back pocket. Pull back wide enough, and the same architecture runs through every single generation's story. Loss aversion, scarcity thinking, and a deep, quiet exhaustion that comes from learning, repeatedly, that no matter how correctly you play, the rules can be rewritten in a way that takes it all back. Because what nobody wants to say directly is this: every habit that gets labeled a mistake was actually a smart and reasonable adaptation to the specific financial reality that person was living inside. The silent generation's conservatism made sense. The boomers' asset fixation made sense. Gen X's defensive self-reliance made sense. Millennial presentism made sense. It all made sense. The system simply kept redefining what sense required. And every single fear that gets produced by that process is someone's business model. Fear of market uncertainty sells gold and annuities. Financial desperation sells payday loans and buy now, pay later schemes. Hope and FOMO sell trading courses and crypto presales. Your financial habits aren't random. They're scar tissue. And in most cases, they're also someone else's revenue stream. So, before you judge how another person manages their money, or sit with shame about how you manage yours, ask the more honest question first. What were they handed when they started? What did they watch happen to the people around them? What promises were made, carried for years, and then quietly dissolved before they ever had a real chance to build something solid? Your relationship with money isn't a personality flaw. It's a nervous system carrying the memory of every moment the ground shifted unexpectedly. And the most important first step toward genuinely changing it isn't discipline or a better budgeting app. It's stopping the cycle of blaming yourself for how you survived the experiment. You were placed in without your knowledge or consent. Drop a comment below. Which generation are you? And does any of this match how you actually experience money? If you want to go deeper on any of this, subscribe. There's a lot more to unpack.